welcome to the Phoenix Downbeat. I am Drew Kreisman, along with my brother Ira Kreisman. You know us as the Everything is Final Fantasy podcast. We are, of course, along with our good friend Ryan Laney, the Airship Overdrive project. Be sure to check out, by the way, everything on Airship Overdrive on the YouTubes. I was listening to your battle on the big bridge, like super wonka, whatever that wop with the effect pedal, man. That was cool.
Yeah, I think that was, if I remember the one you're talking about, I think it was either with a phaser or it might have had a zero through flanger effect going on. Man, I could talk about guitar pedals all day, but we're not here for that right now.
Oh, yeah. No, right. We have a very different purpose today, which is to discuss for an entire episode a non-Nobuo Uematsu piece of music, which is going to be fun. We've been very Uematsu focused and heavy and will continue to be because, as we've said many times before, he's a genius. But so is Hitoshi Sakimoto. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Hitoshi, not Hitachi. I'm pretty sure. But he was the composer for Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy XII, many other wonderful things. But he provides the landscape of Ivalice, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite pieces of his, the streets of Rabanastre from Final Fantasy XII.
Woo, I'm excited. And as we get into this one also, I also call it the streets of Rabanastre usually. If you look up recordings, if you look up like MIDI files or anything on this, it's sometimes called the Royal City of Rabanastre, and it's sometimes specifically called like Rabanastre Upper Ward Town theme. Like it's got a couple different names, but yes, I also usually refer to it as Streets of Rabanastre. But for at least one thing we'll discuss today, I think the fact that it's also called the Royal City of Rabanastre is going to make a very big point at some point in this discussion.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And then, of course, we talked in our last episode about kids running through the city corner or kids running through the street really is what that's about, right? And so I love these like very literally titled pieces sometimes. We've come a long way since Battle 1, Town, but it's still not...
Town.
Town. That's what this could have been called, Town.
Yeah.
But it's not. So let's begin. It's kind of like we did with Liberi Fatali and a little bit with Anacreon, but more with the first one. I kind of want to break it up as we go through the first time. So anybody who, if you're listening at home and you'd like to pause it, listen to the whole thing now, because it does a lot of movement. It's I think a point worth making up front is it's a lot different from those first, especially 9 soundtracks, in that it doesn't loop every minute or minute and a half, 2 minutes. It goes much longer. And so we're going to need to dive into some of the tasty details there. So at first, I'm just going to play the first minute of Streets or Royal City of.
Yeah, and luckily for this one, for those listening, if you've not played 12, I'll be shocked if we have any spoilers about the story in this one, because Rabanastre is like the first place you start off in, and as far as what I can tell from my analysis, there's not really a ton of like story elements that can be spoiled from what's happening in the music. It's basically, here's this gigantic city in the middle of the map that you frequently come back to in Final Fantasy XII, and it's kind of got a mix of cultures that I'm sure we're going to discuss shortly, but don't worry about any spoilers. If you haven't played 12, I think you could enjoy this episode with zero concern.
Yeah. So I cut us off right there because it kind of loops, but it doesn't loop because the next bit is going to add a whole lot of new things, right? But it starts our melody over right there.
Yeah. So as the music professional in the room or the expert, let me, as I always like to do, ask the musical laypersons, when you hear just what we've heard so far, that first minute or so, what do you feel? What do you sense that this is trying to set as far as an atmosphere, a setting, a mood? What's your expectation if you'd never played this game before?
Yeah, it feels pretty light. The flute or flute like sound, at least, is pretty gentle. It evokes, as we talked about last time, the concerning hobbits, kind of a safe place. A little bit of an adventure feel to it. Um, I was trying to find the piece I was thinking of, and I couldn't. There is, I think, unless I hallucinated it, a musical piece from Tactics Advance that's like the guild or the town song theme that this feels an awful lot like. Now, I don't know who composed Tactics Advance, so maybe it was a different person.
Let me check while you're going.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're on the right track. I never finished Tactics Advance. I did play a portion of it way back when it first came out. But I do remember that there is a similar kind of like theme and sort of feel to it. I think a lot of that is because, like Drew said at the start, these all take place in the world of Ivalice. Like, this is the same shared common universe between them. And I'm guessing that was a very conscious effort to say, hey, let's try to in some way tie these things together, even if the stories are almost entirely separate, you know?
Right. It's kind of bouncy, kind of floaty, kind of gentle. And I think there's like the guild theme or something early on when you first meet Mont Blanc, and you're learning how things work. And this sort of feels a little bit like Tutorial Town music, at least to begin with.
Drew, how does the sound make you feel, or what do you expect based on the tone?
Yeah, so first of all, I looked it up, and it is Sakimoto who composed Tactics Advance. Along with it says help from Nobuo Uematsu and Kaori Okoshi, which is a name I do not know. But
yeah, Uematsu did work a little bit on, I think actually, except for 13, I think he worked a little bit on everything from 10 through 14 to a degree, even though he wasn't like the lead guy.
Right. But no, I came prepared for this one because I was listening to it again this morning. I said, Ryan's going to ask you how this makes you feel. And you can't just say it makes me feel like Final Fantasy XII. But no, I've always had this particular association with this type of sound, I think. But this music really makes me feel like the sun is coming up. The starting here, this again, outside of the story of the game, detaching myself from it, there's a bum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba bum ba dum ba dum ba dum, but that just sounds like. Now, part of it is I often listen to this piece in the morning as I'm making my coffee and getting ready for my day. But yeah, it makes me feel like the sun is coming up and the day is beginning, and also the story is beginning, and yeah.
The sun coming up is a surprisingly spot on analogy that I wish I had thought of before this, because there's two reasons behind it. The first is that we hear French horn feature, or some sort of horn type thing, and horn by default, if you play what's called a natural horn, the way that they were played hundreds of years ago, they do kind of have this bloom effect to them. Bwah, bwah. It's not like a trumpet or like a trombone where it's very pointed. It's more kind of blooming is the best way I can use for it. But also it has this sort of jaunty, we mentioned the Hobbits a minute ago, this sort of jaunty little, triple meter skipping sort of thing. And those all combine to make this very, like you said, a very bright start of the day type thing. Let me ask you guys this. I'm going to play a portion of what we hear a lot through this piece. And the simple question is going to be, does this feel like it is in a major or a minor setting? And it's going to be just a simple little passage.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is tough to place, isn't it? I would.
Feels major to me, but
Iris is major.
Yeah, I was going to go the other way. I was going to say it feels slightly minor to me. Yeah.
Interesting. So you guys have flawlessly proven my point without us even talking about it beforehand, because it is neither. It is an open, perfect fifth. It's a D and an A. And that's all we hear as kind of our repeating baseline portion. And it's funny that one of you heard it as like, oh, it sounds kind of major, and one of you heard it as, oh, it sounds kind of minor, because since there is no what you'd call character tone, the third of the chord is not present, you could hear it either way, and it's perfectly valid. Maybe a certain overtone you're hearing in the harmonic series, maybe what we just listened to is still kind of in your ear's memory, so to say, but there is no actual tonality to it. It's just very, very open. And something that they did when they made this choice to make sort of the repeating part just be an open, perfect fifth throughout the entire piece is actually super, super clever for reasons I'm going to explain right here. First, if I play this, does this sound at all familiar to you?
Oh, that's the computer sound.
Yeah, it's like a old Windows startup thing, right? Yeah. What about this one? Intel inside.
Oh, right. I was kind of as a processor.
Yeah. So both of these themes, they were written by like various kind of corporate jingle writers, and they wrote them so that, among other things, it would include people from other cultures that maybe weren't from Western 12-tone music. And they wanted it to be something that would kind of appeal to anyone worldwide who happened to hear a commercial, happened to purchase one of their items, no matter where they came from. And so to play both of those jingles, there's like the Windows kind of startup or slow down one, you can play that using only perfect fourths and fifths. There are no quality chords in the middle. And the Intel one is also only perfect fourths and fifths. So there's no natural minor or major to it. This is a trick a lot of people will use when they're trying to write something that sounds very open, very broad, very inviting, very much like, yeah, anyone can enjoy this, by not using a character tone. They're not applying a major or a minor quality to it. It's literally just as open as you can be, aside from playing just like perfect octaves nonstop.
That's really cool.
So if you play an open, if you play it open, and I hear it as major, and Drew hears it as minor, is that like a personality test? Does that say something?
It's honestly, there's a lot of possibilities that go into it. The one that I subscribe to the most is that it depends on which harmonic overtones you might be picking up more easily. But that's a whole discussion that, if you want to have another episode, we could easily have, because it would derail us for like 15 minutes to discuss. but you're not far off. Like there are reasons you might hear it one way or another.
This is the part of the podcast where we dive deep into psychology and
yeah. So building off of that, now we've got this open fifth, this D and A thing pulsing through, right? That's very common. And the first things we hear, that's just like not really a proper melody, but it's kind of like this little like supporting thing that goes along with it that kind of sounds like this. And they play it in different keys later as well. But those melodies are also only constructed of perfect fourths and fifths. You don't know if they're supposed to be in major or minor unless you hear either an F natural or an F sharp. And since none of those things I just played comes across that note, all you can say is that, hey, there might be a lowered seventh, there might be a major seventh, there might be, a major second. But if there's no 3 and if there's no 6 in the scale that you're playing in, it's really hard to kind of discern your harmonic basis, your modal basis for a lot of this, which is really clever because they made the first part of the song just based around those fourths and fifths, which I'll prove right now. If I go to a different key, if I go to, let's say, the key of A, and I play those same kind of things with just the fourths and fifths involved, which is going to be the notes A, D, and E. If I add a C sharp to that, it's going to sound major. But if I add a C natural to it, it changes the entire thing, regardless of whether or not I'm still playing that fourth and fifth around it.
That is, yeah, that's really cool. I definitely, I've never been a good enough musician to pull off any of those particular kinds of tricks. That's awesome. And it also, in addition, I think adds to that feel of walking, right? You're walking. So there's the rhythmic part of it. That's the boom da boom da boom da, which kind of feels like a pacing, right? And the whole time we've been listening to it, by the way, all three of us have been bobbing our heads back and forth because it's got that to it. But everything you just described to me also makes me understand why this piece, maybe say more than Kids Run Through the City from 6, makes me feel like people are walking is that walking is that kind of, it's almost a neutral activity, but it's movement, right? It's a pace, it's a slowness, it's an openness that you're just sort of gliding, but you don't really think about it. Also,
Yeah.
right?
I would agree. And this is another one of those instances where it's like, oh no, Drew's burying the lead of something I'm going to discuss later. But you're spot on, because we're talking about something that's happening. This is highly programmatic music, which is where something is happening that's being reflected in the music, as opposed to absolute music, which is just like the Bach, keyboard variation or the well-tempered clavier variations, Goldberg variations. That's just music for music's sake. But this reflects something. And something I'll bring up now on that exact thing is we start off with this sort of triple meter, skipping meter type thing that sounds kind of like this, right? Bum, ba-dum, 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 which as I'm singing it, Drew's literally like bobbing back and forth in his seat. But then there's these little snippets every now and then where we hear this instead. How is that different?
Don't know, but I really wanted to ask you about these bass because they do something weird every time. I feel like I forget them, and in the orchestral version, it's played like on an oboe or maybe a bass clarinet. Kind of, it's a woodwindy.
Yeah, it's either a bassoon or a bass clarinet. Yeah.
Which kind of reminds me of like Peter and the Wolf or something like that.
Yes, very much.
And then there's on the piano, though, it really comes out more. If you're listening to the orchestral version, that might kind of fade into the background. But boy, do they bring it out on the Piano Collections version of it. And no, all I can do is throw your question back at you and say, I don't know, Ryan, why is that different? What is it doing to me?
I sense, does Ira have something to throw in?
No, I'm right there with Drew. It's intriguing, but I don't know why.
Yeah, here's my guess. And through a lot of this, I tried to find some background information or some quotes from the composer about how he wrote this piece. I couldn't find anything, and so this is all conjecture. Feel free to consult him directly and ask what the actual process was.
We should have him on the show sometime.
Yeah, we should. and like 3 translators.
Right. Yeah, right.
And but here's my suspicion is that we start off with this very skipping triplet melody. But when we get that every so often interlude of a duple meter, or a straight meter it's called, I think of that as, there's like an ox or a chocobo maybe walking by carrying a cart of some kind, or not carrying, but pulling a cart of some kind. And if you've ever heard like a horse trot by, that's almost the exact pace and meter that they trot in. Clop, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, instead of the galloping or the cantering kind of like but triplet type meter. And so already, and this is the thing I was leading to, is in just those 2 concepts of having the skipping plus the straight time, what does that already tell us that we're kind of in the middle of?
I've got this one. That's hustle and bustle, right? That's multiple paces happening at the same time. It's some people are walking at this pace. Some people are running to get to their appointment because they're late. Some people are slowing down because they're shopping at the market. Some people are not people. They are chocobos or
yeah.
Right? So everyone's got a different pace in a city like this.
That's spot on. And the key word there is multiple. Is that we are in this gigantic city that seems to be also a trade city in many regards, even though it does also have some diplomatic, control over what's going on in Final Fantasy XII. But we have lots of different things happening at the same time. And that's going to be one of the things that we're going to hit on throughout this whole entire thing here. But moving forward into our actual song here, we've only discussed the first 17 seconds so far, but there's so much in it. Oh, it's so good. So already we get into our first proper melody, right? And now we finally have an answer. Are we in major or are we in minor? And based on what our layperson musicians in the room would say, does this sound major or minor?
Sounds major.
It's major. It's clearly major. We have a very clearly defined D major triad being outlined in the melody. It's based on the first and the fifth note. there's that D and A again. And the only thing keeping it from being just the natural major is that we do also have C natural in here, which in the key of D means that we're not in normal D major. We're going to have this sort of modal sound. This is our Mixolydian mode. We discussed modes briefly in our last episode, and this one is going to be neither, for most of it, neither strictly major, neither strictly minor or natural minor. We're going to be in this sort of sailing song of sorts sound. A lot of S's in there. And so you're going to expect to hear this thing that sounds more like folk melodies than it might sound like something from, quote unquote, capital M music that you would see in a music textbook sort of stuff.
Yeah. You said that was Mixolydian is the name of the mode?
It's Mixolydian. Mixolydian it's a major scale with the lowered 7th degree. If you play C to C on a keyboard, but you add a B flat instead of B natural, like this, that's your Mixolydian mode. And again, there are 7 different primary modes in 12-tone music, but there are also countless altered modes that you can get into. So we have this part here where we have our main melody, and then every now and then we hear this really odd thing jump in that sounds like this sometimes. But it's played on something besides the flute. If you remember, what do we hear this thing? What is that played on in the full orchestra version?
I'd have to listen again.
Go ahead and rewind to maybe, like, I'd say, I'm just guessing, the 15-second mark. Maybe it's somewhere in there. Yeah, right there. So we heard it where it had this like blah 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 sort of sound.
Kind of an oboe-y thing. It was hard for me to place it, but
yeah, it's kind of on an oboe, and there is also a little bit of a brass texture in there somewhere. Yeah. I could be wrong, but it sounds like either another horn effect, a euphonium perhaps. Play it one more time. We can really give it a listen, see if we can guess what that instrument is.
There's definitely a French horn in the background there now that I was listening for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're walking the streets of, let's say you're in some trade town here in the real world, and you're walking the streets and you're hearing these people playing small like oboe type things, flutes, small, easily movable woodwind instruments, what would cause someone then to have a large, unwieldy, hard to maintain, hard to build brass instrument? Like who would be playing that?
Someone of money, I suppose, in a world like this, but yeah.
Someone of money. We're on the right track.
A government of some kind, perhaps?
Yes. As we're going to see later, we only hear the brass parts really featured when it sounds like it's more of a declamatory, fanfare-ish, here comes the king sort of ideal. And we hear this little melody. We hear that as the kind of like common person's theme. And whenever we hear these brassy fanfares, the way I think of it this first time we hear it is, somewhere off in the distance, 2 blocks away, behind a corner, not quite at the forefront, there's also a fanfare of some kind, something announcing someone is coming or something is happening, whatever it is in this particular city, there's an announcement happening with brass instruments. And if you think of like herald bugles, the crazy long ones that have the banners hanging down from them with usually no valves or anything of any kind, that's the sort of thing you'd expect from, like Ira just said, the government officials. It's part of the city proper. It's not something of the layperson. And so as we go through this, you're going to hear these conflicts between, I'm walking down the street, but as Drew said, I hear multiple things from multiple places all the time. Keep going a little farther into the piece, and let's see if we can hear some more stuff like that. What do you hear?
I mean, you mentioned the sailing music and the folk stuff before. Now that's all I can hear, especially once the violins really take over the melody there. It just feels so much more like you played for us last time the piece of music from Final Fantasy XIV in Aleport, and it invokes that type of feel, right?
Yes, very much so. We're hearing the same thing where we hear this main little flute melody, and I would call that like the main theme of Rabanastre. It's in the key of D major, and yet a lot of these little like brass, mini fanfares, little interludes that we hear that kind of interrupt it, they're in different keys entirely. One of them is in the key of like F sharp major, which does not play super nicely with D major at the same time. I'm going to share a link with you guys here, and Drew, when you get this, I want you to go ahead and forward to about the 9-minute and 6-second mark. And for those of us who are listening on headphones, this is your headphone warning now. This is your headphone warning now. It might get very loud on your speakers where Drew is. So just be warned. And Drew, if you don't mind, go ahead and play this from about 9:06. And we're going to listen to it for about a minute until about 10:10, somewhere in that range. And again, volume warning, because it might get very loud. And I'll tell you right now, it's going to sound very abrasive. And we're going to talk about it. So this is a piece by a man named Charles Ives. It's called 3 Places in New England. Based on what you heard here, Ira and Drew, what does that kind of sound like? And you can use the most bare bones, basic, non-musical terms you want.
Sounds to me like traffic. A lot of calling back and forth. Right? There's a little bit of Rhapsody in Blue.
Or, it does sound very Gershwin.
Yeah, or I think it's Leonard Bernstein, Candide. Trying to reach back to high school.
I love Candide. Da, 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 da. Right. Fantastic tune.
And lots of different things, right? Like lots of different melodies coming in and out. And that's sort of what we're hearing in Rabanastre too, is different instrumentation. If I go back to my earliest music theory lessons, Peter and the Wolf, which Drew just brought up, right? Like every instrument can be a different character. Every melody can be a different character. So the calling back and forth, the different paces has a similar vibe there, I think.
Yeah. And Drew, how do you hear that?
My phrase, I'm so glad he said traffic, because I was going to say controlled chaos, which is often how I think of traffic. Yeah, it's where it feels like there's almost too much going on. It also feels like there's things interrupting each other a lot, right? Especially as you were, and you had my ear trained to listen into it, I think. But the way the brass would seem to come in and enter, like the flute is doing this incredible, or the strings are doing some incredibly intricate melody, and then the brass is like, I don't care, Bobby. Like, all right. Like, and so yeah, it's that kind of all these things clashing and overlapping on top of each other.
Yeah, so you guys are both hearing things that were exactly intended by the composer. Again, for those listening, this is a piece by Charles Ives. This is the second movement of a piece called 3 Places in New England. And Charles Ives might not be a name that most people recognize unless you're like in the music world, quote unquote. But he's a guy who lived in the early 1900s, and one of the big, like kind of I guess germination points for his style when he wrote music was, the story goes that when he was a young kid, there was a big festival parade of some kind happening in his town, and he grew up in the New England area. And what happened was he kind of wandered away during this parade from his friends, from his parents, and he found, I think, a church or a school building that he sat on top of. Like, he found his way up on top of the roof to watch the parade come from both the way it was coming toward the main part of the area and then also leaving the main part of the area. And so for some reason, when he was a young kid, the idea of hearing one band, literally a marching band, come this way playing one melody while another marching band walked away playing a different song entirely, it could be a different key and different tempo and whatever you want, he really liked that sound. And so a lot of his stuff, which you could hear this song on a stage performed probably this month somewhere in the world, because it's a very well-known piece in the classical music world, it made that big, like, poignant moment for him of like, that sounds kind of cool, I want to use that in my music. And so when you hear these things of like a marching melody or an old British hymn tune or something, and then it's overlapped by, oh, here's a piccolo melody, here's a brass fanfare, here's something that's completely out of time, that's how he wrote his music. There were even parts in his scores where it would tell certain instruments, like, literally play this out of time, because he wanted it to sound like it was literally some other performer, not part of what's on the stage, performing this at the same time. And wouldn't you know it, in a piece like Rabanastre, my suspicion is that the composer took that exact same premise and said, hey, we're in this middle of a city, all this hustle and bustle of different things and different sounds happening concurrently. They kind of rubbed off the rough edges a little, more compared to what Ives does here. But we have that same thing where you have something in the key of D major, and then suddenly out of the blue, there's this sort of fanfare on the side, which separately might sound fine, but together it creates, like you said, the controlled chaos, the traffic, the mess of just things, multiple things happening all at the same time.
That's a really cool way to think of creating a sound that you would hear that kind of cacophony, and rather than go, oh, I hate it, like, make it the central thesis of your genius. That's amazing.
Yeah, if you want a fun little exercise to try with your friends sometime who can also play like a simple keyboard melody on a piano, is try to have one of you play a simple, like, Frere Jacques type melody in one key, while someone else plays like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in a different key on the same keyboard at the same time. I'm going to try to do exactly that here. Forgive my piano skills if I don't play it perfectly well. But if you play like Frere Jacques on one hand in one key, and you play Twinkle Twinkle in another key on the right hand, I'm going to play it slowly, you get this sort of effect. Which separately they sound fine, but at the same time, even when they're playing in the same tempo, at the same pace, what's it sound like?
Dissonant.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the epitome of dissonant. Yeah. It's just, they're not designed to work together. It's the tuna in your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They're both fine separately, but together, it ain't happening, friend. But if it's the emotion you want to evoke, if it's the setting you want to evoke, then it's very, very effective. If you want to make someone a sandwich because they keep asking to borrow some of your sandwich, and you think, oh, I'll give them the tuna peanut butter jelly sandwich so that they never ask me again, then hey, you've served the purpose and the expectation of what you were trying to do, which is exactly what they're doing here.
Love it. that is an excellent extension of an analogy, sir.
Why, thank you. Let's keep going though on Rabanastre, and there's some other cool stuff we're going to discuss here. So right there, they did something really sneaky that also does some really cool world building. Did either of you catch it?
Well,
I,
maybe. I definitely heard a couple of things in there, but it might not be what you're referring to. Ira, you go first so that I can potentially be more right.
there's a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics a little earlier in that bit. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, there was definitely, like, both Tactics and this, they really thrive on those open chords. Like, it might have been just simply that sort of sound bed that you might have been hearing. But yes, also the combination of orchestration where they have kind of like this string plus flute with a horn on the bottom part of it. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of like shared DNA between the Tactics soundtrack and this particular song in 12.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there's like some plucked strings or something that is almost a direct quote, as it were.
It could be. If you happen to find it, pull up a scene, or if we need to like make an addendum later on this episode, if Ira finds it.
I'll see if I'm going to mute myself and see if I
Yeah,
can find it.
if you know which Tactics piece it is, because I'd love to, because I do that a lot of times too. There's a bit in the Final Fantasy VII remake soundtrack, to the Let the Battles Begin piece, the bass battle music that plays.
Yeah.
That invokes this sound to me, that reminds me of Ivalice. And I think Sakimoto even helped work on some of those soundtracks as well. But the other thing that I heard here was a harp playing an arpeggio. And anytime in Final Fantasy I hear a harp playing an arpeggio, even if it's not exactly the same or quite the right key, I go, hey, prelude, crystals.
So you're not far off for the harp prelude thing. This is another great instance where they went with a mode that is not quite the major or minor, like the normal major and minor Aeolian or Ionian modes. But what we have here, if it's the part I'm thinking of, is they actually use a Lydian mode harp little progression, not Mixolydian. This is Lydian based on the 4th scale degree, and it gets kind of this sort of sound. And you'll hear that a few times, and it's another way of saying here's a different kind of piece, a different kind of theme, a different, even a culture of music we're going to squish together. The thing that I'm pointing out, though, that I'm going to lead us towards here, though, is we hear a familiar melody, but it's set differently. Did you catch what they were doing there?
No, but can we go back and listen to it again?
Absolutely. Go back maybe 20 seconds, I would guess, at most.
I think it's around here.
What did they do? What did they do?
I'm hearing it, but I'm not placing it, Ryan.
So I'll give it away. So in the first part of this song, we hear this melody, and it's very, to be simple, or to be blunt, it's very simple. Right? And it sounds very plaintive. It sounds very common, like the common person could play it. You hear maybe one or two instruments playing at the same time, that melody. At this point in the song, though, we hear it where it's a full, like, brass and strings and woodwinds and percussion orchestra playing it, and they're no longer in the skipping triple meter. We're now in a straight time duple meter of the same thing. We've taken something that was of the common people, and now it has been adopted by the city government. And we're showing this change from something that is, it was naturally born as a folk song, because you can't often, point out this song started here. It kind of just comes about frequently, right? Kind of like folk stories and whatnot. And then suddenly we see it in the big picture as something that someone must have had to sit down and arrange for this brass band, for this orchestra, whatever the consort is here. and say, here are the parts, but it's in our version now. It's in the, capital P proper style that represents Rabanastre. And what they've done with this little like melody is it's almost the exact same thing, but it's just been slightly tweaked so that the meter is in a very straight time. I hear it called like the French skip or the English skip, where instead of being bum ba dum ba da, it's bum ba dum ba dum. But it sounds very like orderly and very to the point, and then it's completely fleshed out. Bum ba-dum ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-da-yum ba. But there's also a proper harmony behind it that sounds like it was properly someone sat down with paper and a keyboard and said, how can we take this and make it sound like something far more grandiose? Even here, everyone here in this podcast, we're all from the United States of America. Can you think of something in American music culture that also relates to our government that has a similar origin?
Hail to the chief?
Maybe. I don't know if Hail to the Chief.
I don't think so. That's a too, no.
How about something like that?
Oh, sure.
What was that, Ira?
I was going to say something like Yankee Doodle.
Yankee Doodle is also a good example. That's one where it was literally like a British, like a folk song that was used to mock American soldiers and whatnot. But our national anthem, the melody is literally based off of a bar song.
An old drinking song, yeah.
Yep, it's an old drinking song.
To Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee, a few sons of harmony sent a petition that
And look at that. Even here in the real world, we've taken something that was a of the people and of the people sort of, melody, and it was adopted to eventually become something for the, capital P proper government and identity of a city, a country, a state, whatever the case is, that happened here. And they did the exact same thing in the Rabanastre theme, where this is, again, back to the very beginning of this episode. I love how sometimes it's called Streets of Rabanastre and sometimes it's called Royal City of Rabanastre, because it serves both purposes. How cool is that? It's so cool.
That's amazing. And it also, it's with all of those instruments, with all the, like you said, it's like the brass and the strings and the woodwinds all going hard at the same time together. It has that, like you said, the organization of it, that you need so many different voices, right, to be right on the same, which is the exact opposite of the chaos that you just gave us with the Ives piece, the hustle and bustle of a city where kind of everyone's going about their business. And not to make liars out of us, but slight spoilers for Final Fantasy XII. As you mentioned, this is basically like town one, right? This is where you first go. But also very early on in the story, you start to see the political machinations that are going to take this place, and it's going to very quickly be occupied. It is going to very quickly in the story become a place where military and order and a certain kind of, once again, it's Final Fantasy, so fascism is going to be imposed on a group of people who are like our main characters, Penelo and Vaughn, particularly, who live there, kind of the street urchin, sky pirate, rougher, rumble tumble type of people, right? And so, I had never intellectually put all that together before, maybe felt it like you say in music, a lot of times you feel it more than you understand it. But the first half of the piece being the song of the people, of Penelo and Vaughn and the undercity and the streets and everything you've got to do to scrape and get by in a place like this. And then it evolves into something very orderly and celebratory. But what is it celebrating? That's tasty.
Isn't that so good? And on that same thing, like briefly discussing the story, this is not a spoiler in any way, but I thought it was really a good idea, even if it may not have been executed the way I would have preferred to see it. But if you play the Zodiac Age version of this, they actually start the game differently than if you had played the on-release version of Final Fantasy XII. It starts with this kind of like, I don't want to call it a flashback, but it's like a separate, kind of vignette happens. And then you get introduced to Vaughn and Penelo and all those things. And if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, I only played the original release once a long time ago when it first came out. But if you played the original one, what's the actual first starting thing you do when you fire the game up? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember. I do think it is that scene with Vaughn's brother, Rex, I think is his name, and they're out
Okay.
on that mission where something happens to the prince, right? And
Right.
I mean, it's the opening CGI cutscene. First, you get the parade, and Ash and the prince, whose name I always forget, get married, and then it's like she goes straight from wearing the wedding gown to the funeral gown, right?
Right.
It's such a remarkable opening cutscene. But I think, yeah, once you first take control, it's that scene with Vaughn's brother very briefly, and then you pick up with Vaughn and Rabanastre like a year late, 6 months, whatever it is. It's there's a time jump, and then
Yeah, there's a little difference of some kind. I haven't played, like I said, the original version in a while, but I remember that they changed the intro for the Zodiac Age release, where you play through the thing with Rex for a good amount, like I want to say at least like half an hour or so. Like it's an actual
dungeon.
Yeah, it's basically its own mini dungeon. Yeah, where it's like, here's a thing you control, and then you never see it again. Basically, well, you never see those people in that scenario ever again. But it's interesting how they went from, like what you're saying, where it's talking about the common people related to the government. And in here, it's doing that same thing where it's taking this common person's melody, and then suddenly it was adopted by the government as part of like a city identity or a state identity of some kind. Even a lot of other, places, their folk or their national anthems come from folk songs. I'm sure if you look up things like Canada and various places in like Southeast and Southwest Asia, Africa, a lot of these are from folk melodies. And it's so cool that they put that here in the Rabanastre theme too, where we hear it as the folk melody, and then we hear it as the capital P proper music version as well.
Ira, did you ever find that piece from Tactics you were looking for?
Yes. Okay. So I'm hallucinating, but I definitely hear something. I think it is. I'm thinking about the introductory piece, in fact, that we talked about 2 or 3 episodes ago.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to 203 on this, I'm fairly certain it's like a line and a half. It feels like a harp or like struck strings or something like that. That feels like it's pulled directly from the sort of the do bits of of that introductory Tactics piece.
To speak technically.
So can you go to 203 on this one? That part right there.
The little harpy bits?
Yeah.
The little...
Okay, am I crazy? Yes.
So you might have been muted or like listening to something else when Drew and I were discussing it, but that's that Lydian little scale that I was talking about. And yes, okay. I can hear it as well. I don't know the name of the piece that I heard it. I don't know if it's like a map theme maybe, or like a menu of some kind, but I can hear it from Tactics somewhere in my brain for sure.
Okay. So yeah, I was searching for that part in this piece while you guys were talking. I heard Lydian, but I was looking for the other bit.
If one of us can find it, Drew can put the edit in right here where we found what that Tactics song was.
I'll get it in there. Yeah. And the funny thing is that type of, and correct me if I'm using the terminology wrong here, but that type of voicing is very common for Sakimoto. I said in our piece where we talked about the Tactics soundtrack, I think we did 2 episodes, maybe just 1, but that I often praise Uematsu for the extreme diversity of his soundtracks, and they can be all over the place. And I think it's what makes him the greatest composer alive in my mind, or maybe ever. But I do think guys like Sakimoto, and we talked a little bit about Mitsuda last time, what they will often do is create a very consistent language or voice or feel to a place that often evokes that. So Tactics uses that kind of... It's in getting ready for the battle music that I remember from Tactics. It's in the intro piece. Mm-hmm. He'll reuse and borrow his own melodies for both Tactics and 12 a lot. And so I think he, as well as any composer that I can think of, does a great job of creating his own language. Is it right? Or if that makes kind of a sense, and then saying,
absolutely,
this is what Ivalice is. And so you should hear that type of thing. You should constantly almost be going like, oh yeah, like Tactics.
Yeah, you can almost think of it like I know Ira, you're a librarian, and I'm sure you read a lot of books and talk about a lot of books, and you can think about authors having a voice, right? Where if I read a book that's by, let's say, Stephen King, I can tell within the first chapter without knowing who it was. I could probably say, "Oh, Stephen King wrote this," if I know enough of his background work. And music is the exact same way, where you can hear something, like even if you like hear like a song on the radio with a very distinct singer's voice, you could go, "Oh, that's AC/DC," or "Oh, that's Carly Rae Jepsen," or whoever it is, without someone telling you, "Here's that new single from Carly Rae Jepsen." Like, you just know based on how it sounds, right? And good composers will do that exact same thing, whether it's across their whole entire breadth of work, where you can go, "Oh, that sounds like a Rachmaninoff," or "That sounds like a Stravinsky," or whatever. But you could also have it be about what they're building. This is a good example of using like Final Fantasy VIII, which is an Uematsu composition, the whole soundtrack for that one. And if you listen to it in the kind of like more disc one town areas, I'll say, where you listen to like the Balam town theme, Balam Garden, Delling City, they sound like and Timber as well. Or what's the place? It's just called Timber, right? That little town in 8. If you listen to those town themes, they sound like they're part of the same world, right? But then you get to like the themes you hear on the Ragnarok or during time compression or doing other weird things, and you're in a different place entirely.
Yeah.
And that's a really clever thing that a good composer does, where it says, I'm going to put the person in this world, but only when I want them to be in that world. Ivalice is a great example of, hey, if we're in the kind of like typical places of Ivalice, this is why the music of Tactics and 12 sounds so dang similar. He purposely did that. It would have been a bad choice, in my opinion, if he was like, all right, we did Tactics, it was great, but now something different. What should we do for 12? Well, wait a minute, 12 is in the same universe, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but just ignore Tactics, just make something new. That might feel very disconnected and very disjointed, which later, if you play 12, there are areas and there are sections of the game with very different sounding music than what we're hearing here, but it's to good effect. It's because the composer and the director of the game, they want you to feel like you're in a completely separate place than Rabanastre or another kind of populated city on the same continent.
Right. Even without there being we often refer to Final Fantasy having their going to the moon moment, though Tactics and 12 don't quite. They have their wow, this got weird moment for sure, but the Ivalice games also don't quite go to the moon, and so we like you said, we get variety here, but I think just a different kind.
For me, the go to the moon moment in 12 was when it got to the end, and I just thought, oh, that's the end.
Yeah, it does have a Death Star run right there at the end, which is great.
It does. That's true. Let's go ahead though. There's not much left in this this piece before it starts to loop. Let's listen to the last couple little bits. And that's it. And then it loops. And oddly enough, at the beginning of this, I think Drew said something along the lines of like, oh yeah, the Rabanastre theme, it's a long piece.
It's so long, man.
It's a long piece, but how long does it actually go until it loops?
About 3 minutes.
About 3 minutes. And it feels like it's longer though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think part of why earlier you said something like, oh, it goes for like a 7-minute long piece. It's like a 9-minute long piece. It's actually only about 3 minutes long before it loops. Yeah. But it feels like it's going across so many different sections, so many different styles and whatnot, that it gives you this feeling of like, whoa, it's so open and so stretched out. But in reality, I think it's a trick on the brain where because they change those styles so frequently, you never have time to really latch onto something and track when it repeats again. Because you hear the same melody over and over again in different forms, and it feels like this song goes for much longer than it actually does. And when you said that earlier, when you were like, oh, it goes for like a 9-minute loop, in my mind, I was like, nope, but I'm not going to say a word about it yet.
just setting you up, totally on purpose. But no, I'm really glad that we're talking about that, because as you're saying, I was like, yeah, why did my brain do all that? And everything that you just said, and also like just the things that we've talked about here, because I think, a lot of times, especially now when you've heard a piece a million times since 2005 or whenever this game came out, right? It's when you let it loops a bunch of times, and sometimes your ear catches certain things, and it's very difficult, is why we listen to certain segments over and over and over again, because you want your ear to latch on to different things going on in the background, really listen and hone in on this. And I think what happens is I'll hear something in the piece and I'll go, oh, I didn't catch that on the first loop. It wasn't there. It's because they added it. It's because the song is continuing to grow. I think, oh, that little counter melody there, it wasn't there the first time, right? No, it was. But my brain was just preoccupied with a different counter melody or a different melody or the bass movements or a certain swell at that moment. It's just, that is a remarkable trick to pull off, because I've been listening to this song for 20 years and have always believed it to be like a 7-minute piece.
And it's funny you say that, because even though I don't wake up in the morning and make my coffee to that Charles Ives piece we listened to a minute ago, but when I do listen to it, you can still pick up these little melodies that you didn't hear on the first 1 or 2 takes. You hear it the third time and you go, oh, weird, there's like, Yankee Doodle or something snuck in there that I didn't hear the first few times I listened to this piece. Same thing is done here. It's so cool.
I had to jump in with a quick edit from the future here, because just after we finished recording this conversation, I was out walking the streets of Denver, and I happened to notice a building down a street I've been down many, many times before, but I just had never taken the time to see it. And it reminded me of this conversation, and it actually closes the loop on this idea of Rabanastre and the Ives piece, right, representing the chaos or even the overstimuli of walking around the city, and you don't always notice every single detail. So me not remembering the length of this piece of music, it struck me as I was like, oh, that building I'm sure has always been there. I've just never noticed it before. Absolute genius.
Shall we listen to the other theme in Rabanastre, the downtown theme?
Yeah.
And this piece, for the listener, this is a much shorter loop and a much less complex. It's a much simpler arrangement here. But there is some really cool stuff that I wanted to point out in this one, and perhaps give you a chance to look up some stuff on your own, do some research on some musical concepts and musical instruments. But this is just the downtown theme, which for those of us for the listeners who haven't played 12, Ira and Drew, how would you guys describe the downtown area of Rabanastre?
It's a little seedier. It's a little more black market, maybe.
Yeah, and they call it downtown, but it's not really downtown. What actually is it?
Is it like a market? It's like a full of. I'm trying to remember it now specifically. It's been a little bit since I've played 12. I've got to admit.
It's underground. It's literally like under the city. There might be 1 or 2 places where it's like a stairway that kind of easily goes from one to the other. But I remember that there's like literal elevators where you go to them, and it's like you go up or you go down. Right. They call it downtown, but they could have called it the underground as well. And what they were just saying, where it's like seedy, kind of black market, kind of sketch, is so spot on. And I think the music serves that. And I wanted to point out just a couple things in this much shorter, much simpler piece here. minute loops. So from the beginning, what'd you guys hear?
Different instruments.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to be a little careful about how I ask this question, because music, like stories, like names, like food, like holidays, are all inextricably tied to culture. And this instrumentation feels to me like deliberately non-Western culture. It feels vaguely Middle Eastern to me, and I don't know if that's real or if that's what I've been conditioned to hear based upon movies and TV that I've seen before. I worry a little bit. We had this conversation. We talked about Red 13 and Barrett, right? They're sort of representative of a real world culture, kind of, and not always in the best light. Though I think their voice actors did a fantastic job in the remakes to reclaim some of that or sort of redefine some of that. So I don't want to say that the seedy part of town sounds vaguely Middle Eastern, because that feels like a pretty crummy thing to say.
Yeah, and I think just by us addressing that and just saying, hey, we don't mean this in any of this way, but for some reason our ears hear this and we think this, right? There is a very authentic and a very valid stance that you're having there. We, of course, the three of us, we are all Western white guys. We have certain backgrounds living in America and whatnot, compared to someone that might have this sort of music. But Ira is spot on in what he's saying, where he says it kind of sounds Middle Eastern. And I would almost equate it to like a bazaar, not a like weird, but like bazaar, Bazaar. Where it's like a market where you're hearing a lot of different things. And there are I'll say two things in particular that might be giving Ira this particular thing you hear. The very first instruments we hear, there's kind of like an acoustic guitar sort of thing that also sounds like a sitar almost. Sitar is that very kind of like twangy sort of fretted plucked instrument that if you look up some videos on, you can find sitars anywhere on YouTube. But it has
Rashida Jones' dad used to play one. Learn
but it has that sound, and there's also some percussion. And I've brought with me some gifts here, not gifts, but some what's the word? Things to show off something, some examples. So for the listeners at home, I've got something here, and I actually have a collection of these. These are called Udu drums. And what an Udu drum is, that they are notoriously hard to record on microphones. So I'll try to play a little bit here. But what they are, they're also called clay pot drums frequently. And they are drums that originated in Africa, primarily. If you look into things like Nigeria, I believe is where they are considered to have originated from. But they're drums that have no membrane. There's no skin or leather or like a head, like a snare drum would have. They are made entirely out of clay. And it's basically a sphere with a small circle cut into one side of it. And there's a spout that would be made from another piece of clay on the other end of it that also ends in a hole. And I'll play this up to the microphone. Hopefully it comes through. If not, I am going to send Drew a link here to an actual Udu drum player that we can maybe put in the description or something on YouTube just to show it, or you can just look up UDU Udu drum. But they sound kind of like this. And it has that weird kind of boom, boom sort of sound, right? And there are similar instruments. I don't own any of these, but if you think of what are called tabla drums, and tabla drums are, they're very hard to play. I've tried a few times. They require insane finger strength, but they're kind of like these very flat drums that you press your wrist into to actually make the head tighter or looser. And so you can get what they also refer to in Africa as a talking drum, which is where it has an inflection that goes up and down as you play it, because you're either tightening or loosening the head in some way. Tablas are the same thing. And these are all instruments, like Ira said, where he goes, well, this sounds very Middle Eastern. It sounds very maybe African or Southeast Asian of some kind. Why is that? And it's because they used instruments that originated from those places. When we hear the first melodic instrument come in, we play these two notes, which to our ears in Western music sounds bad. It's literally, do either of you have any guesses what that interval is called? Or any background?
No.
This is called a tritone. If you play a C and an F sharp on the keyboard at the same time, you get a tritone, and it is the most dissonant interval you can play in one octave. Some people say that a minor second sounds more dissonant to them, this one. But mathematically, the tritone is the most dissonant interval you can play with 2 notes within 1 octave. And
so we had in Omen, Final Fantasy VI, didn't we have that? Did he put 2 right next to each other? I'm trying to remember if we touched on that before.
Sort
just so
of. He used the augmented chord in that one, which was the which does contain tritones, but it's a little different. You're on the right track though, like spot on.
Okay.
And in this one, all we hear to start, it literally begins with those 2 notes. And he does 2 really clever things here with these instruments. The first one being, of course, we hear udu drums, we hear sitar type sounds, and we hear also like a tambourine sound in the background. The more proper term is probably it's a rick, R-I-Q, which is like basically a small handheld tambourine, but they're played slightly differently. Their brass that they're used, or the metal used in their jingles, are a little different also. But all of these things immediately point our ears as Western musicians, as Western media consumers, to go, oh, that sounds Middle Eastern, and it's spot on is, because they're literally using both a instrumentation, and they're using notes from a scale that to our ears sounds very dissonant, but it might be something that's very normal and very typical to the ears of someone who grew up with more what we'd call an Eastern mode or an Eastern tone set. In Western music, there are 12 notes that break up the octave, like between C and C. But in other parts of the world, the octave is broken up in as few as 5 or 6 notes, and as high as 24 notes. We just happen to be used to the one that breaks it up into 12 notes instead.
Yeah, interesting.
I like that explanation. It gets back to what you were saying before about the folk music becoming the, heavy quotes, proper music. That maybe a culture more endemic to the region has now been shoved underground, right? It's not quite under the rotting pizza, but maybe this group is, or it belongs just as much, but because it is not as proper, it's not what some of us might be used to, that it gets literally put underground. It gets swept under the rug, as it were.
Yeah. And if you think back to our discussion about that same Aleport song, when I was talking about how there are instruments that were literally made out of like containers, like shipping containers and crates and barrels and whatnot, that's what I think we hear in the first like 2 seconds of the Downtown theme, is you hear this really big kind of like gong to gong, which to me sounds like not so much an intended instrument, but more like there's a large gate closing behind you, or there's a large pallet of something being dropped onto something. If you don't mind, play the first couple seconds just so we hear that big boom, boom sound. And you never hear it again until the song loops. You only hear it that one time. And so part of me is like, did he mean it as like an actual drum someone is playing, or a shipping container someone's, like beating on as a rhythm instrument? It's in time with the music, but I think it's literally just supposed to invoke like a cavernous sound because you're underground now. And in my eyes, it's the sound of like, oh, you're in the seedy part of town, boom, boom, and the gate just locked behind you and you're here for now. It's a very like a breaking the pencil moment where it's like, you're here now. And sure, you can go back in the game, but it kind of invites you to feel like you're in a totally different place and you're almost like stuck here. I don't remember a whole lot about like the people you meet in the downtown area, except for one quest in particular, but there are definitely some sketchy characters you meet down there.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite traditions in Final Fantasy music to listen out for. I think we actually first brought it up with Chrono Trigger, where there's an end of the world piece of music that doesn't even sound like it's music. It just sounds like somebody left a glass bottle out somewhere and the wind is blowing over it, and there's these long there's no melody to it. There's industrial sounds. In Final Fantasy VII, in a piece, and I'm forgetting the name of it, in the desert, Uematsu uses the sounds of like trash cans, and at one point there's a snake rattle, things like that, right? Where it doesn't sound like music, even though it's played in time and oftentimes even like in key, like in the Chrono Trigger piece. But it doesn't sound like somebody is making this music. It's the exact opposite of what you talked about with Under the Rotting Pizza, where it sounds like, oh, someone's got the boombox out. This is the music. It's almost diegetic music, right? Another term we've talked about before. It's almost, you could hear everyone is listening to this, but this kind of thing is almost like no one's making it. It's just the sounds of the world you're in. It's not being consciously created. It just is. It's just there.
Yeah, saying it that way is a really good example, or not a good example, but it's a good just a good term for it. It just is. Nobody planned this music to happen this way. It just is. Kind of like the building of a language, for example. Hardly anyone ever sets out, unless you're J.R.R. Tolkien, no one sets out to build a language. They just happen as a result of culture, right? And same thing's happening here.
What's the name of the guy who wrote, I think it's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds?
John Cage, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. We could do a whole episode on John Cage and the effects of he had a word for it where it was not happenstance music, but just what we just said, music that happens just because. He had a term for it. I can't remember right now, but yeah, if anyone listening is curious, there's a piece by John Cage called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and it's literally 3 movements long of silence. And I'll tell you right now, I've actually performed it twice.
Oh, wow, amazing. Well, I definitely didn't know that. I want to ask a question and reference a different musician that more people probably have heard of, if I may, because we've gone for over an hour talking about this piece in this game and not mentioned John Williams or Star Wars. And that seems, I don't know how it's possible we did that, given how much people talk about Star Wars, not only with the franchise, but with this particular game. And the other thing that I hear in this downtown piece is not only similarities to the actual, same kind of seedy underbelly that John Williams takes us into with the Cantina piece, but also that juxtaposition of starting us with fanfare and big strings and adventure, and then very quickly into the story taking us to, and then here's this place where it's very far away from whatever lofty ideals we're going to get to, whatever you think, the story is going to be about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, listening to it, I was struck by its similarities to that Cantina piece, which I think is oftentimes inevitably gets compared to this type of stuff when you grew up, for people like us who watch those movies as kids.
Yeah.
You see the underbelly, slightly Middle Eastern, maybe little p problematic in some ways, but
yeah,
ultimately the piece is good and the storytelling is good.
There are many correlations I've heard people bring out about Star Wars to Final Fantasy XII, and the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, you could make like a lot of one-to-one correlations between like the characters, the world, the music, the pacing, the story. To episode 4 in particular, there really are a lot of one-to-one things. I'll send a video as well. We want to discuss it here because we've already discussed, like Drew just said, a long time on this one setting. But that instrument we hear at the start, that sounds like a weird flute. There's an instrument that's from ancient Greece that we don't know entirely exactly what it sounded like because it was from so long ago. There's no recordings of it, but it's an instrument called the aulos. And what it basically is, it's like 2 very simple oboes that you hold next to each other and you play with the same mouth, the same person. I'll put a link in the chat here shortly for us to hopefully put like in the YouTube description or something. But if you watch this video that I'll supply, it has a guy playing the aulos, which again is like 2 flutes, 2 oboes side by side with one hand playing one hand playing the other. And you'll notice that as he's playing it, the sound never stops. It's literally just a concurrent, ongoing thing. And he's doing that by doing what's called circular breathing. Do either of you know what circular breathing is in music?
I had a friend once who could kind of do it. He could sort of do circular breathing and he could sort of do throat singing. And I was amazed by both because it physically does not make sense to me. The ability to breathe in through your nose while simultaneously singing out through your mouth. They tell me it's physically possible, and I've seen someone do it right in front of my face, and I don't.
It seems impossible.
Yeah.
My band director used to say that the breathing in was part of the music.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that that circular breathing sort of removes that, but it's also so darn impressive.
One of my favorite party tricks, because I can do it very simply, is you take a glass of water and a straw and you just blow bubbles in the water nonstop, which is way easier to do than playing an instrument at the same time, because you have to control so much more in your face muscles at the same time. But basically, it's exactly what Drew and I are describing, where you are constantly making air go out of your mouth to power an instrument of some kind. And the simplest way of doing it is where, as you're playing, you're also putting air kind of like in reserves in your cheeks. And then in that split second, when you breathe in through your nose, you're compressing your cheeks to then push that air out to continue the thing going. Then once you have the air in your lungs, you start using that air for the instrument, while at the same time slowly reinflating your cheeks for the next time you have to do it. It's not easy. I'll tell you right now.
Isn't that how bagpipes work?
I was going to say, that's why our ancestors invented a cheat code. Just put all that air in a bag.
Yep. And
air in a bag.
I was literally going to mention, when we discussed the Alos, if we talked about it more, I was going to say, well, wait a minute, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's what bagpipes do. Bagpipes will have what's called a drone sound, where it's just one pitch, or sometimes actually it'll provide that fifth sound. It plays one pitch and then you play over it. And bagpipes, they're generally, unless you play a chromatic set of bagpipes, which are fairly uncommon, if you play a standard bagpipe, they only play like 9 or 10 different notes. They only play in one key total. And so they are like strictly diatonic. They are like, there's no way to play certain pitches that you would play on a piano, for example. And hearing the music that we hear in the Underground theme, if you listen to more of it, you can hear that same sound, where they're like stuck into one little key, not because of ability level or anything. It's literally because the instrument might have been designed that way. In the Alos video, you can see the guy, if you go to like around the 1 minute and 3 second part, for those of you at home, if you listen to this later, there's a part where he basically has one of them droning one single pitch for a long time, and then the left side Alos is playing a simple melody, but he can also change the drone by just simply changing his hands on the right side.
Sure.
Bagpipes, similar thing. It's designed to play one thing, and you just squeeze the bag with your arm, and it continuously plays that noise nonstop. Isn't music so cool from around the world?
Music is amazing. And squeeze the bag with your arm sounds so much easier than the other thing. So, I've had one too many whiskeys for the breathing in while I sing. Put it in the bag.
The only other part of the Underground theme that I'll bring out is that the second half, there are these fanfare-ish brass, like these like wide sweeping fanfare-ish parts that sound like maybe some strings in there possibly too, but it sounds very open, very horn and woodwind sounding. And the way I always interpreted that is that it serves two purposes. One is that it reminds the player, hey, you're still in Rabanastre. Like, this is still part of the same city where you heard brass fanfares on the surface. But also, if I were to physically be in this scenario, it wouldn't be that out of the blue to hear brass fanfares played by some government officials on the surface and hear it below. Sure. And so even though it sounds way too like the EQ, there's way too many high ends to actually hear it the way you would hear it if you were in the sewers and the underground areas. But I think it's trying to emulate this sense of like, oh, every now and then you're going to hear what's happening on the surface down here. And that's all they did with these big womp, 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 womp. That's my idea. I don't know if that's exactly what Sakimoto intended, but I think he did. Yeah.
Even down here under the street, you can't escape the encroaching empire.
Yeah, but this piece, it's so cool, and I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about it in this same episode, because it does have these really cool things that relate to real world musical influences and cultural influences that we might not have even realized it. And I think Ira talked about it to a very, very good degree, where it's like, hey, here are some things that you have to consider when you're discussing these things. But it's real world stuff being put into a video game without even someone like pointing out or saying a word of dialogue about it. It's still setting the tone, it's still setting the atmosphere, and it's still giving the listener this sense of, oh, I know what to expect coming up based on just the music. And that's what makes this music so good. It's just peak. It's awesome.
Boom. Print it. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who has reached out to us. Feel free to let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned, plus anything you would like to hear in the future down in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to Everything is Final Fantasy on Patreon. It's just $1. YouTube, it's free, and all social media platforms, and please do the same for Airship Overdrive, Ryan's project, where you can hear arrangements of some of your favorite video game music, including Final Fantasy, Castlevania, and Journey. Join us next time when we begin a deep dive into Nobuo Uematsu's overworld music.
Ready, go. Ready. Okay.
On your marks, get set.
Fake.
Have you been watching the new season? Yeah. Bike. I can't get over her accent every time. Bike us. All right, here we go.